Welcome, folks, to Go to Market Spotlight, this show where we sit down with people who are changing the marketplace. We dig into the inspiration behind their innovation, the problems they set out to solve, and how they're pushing their industries forward and making markets move. My name is Kevin Donville. I'm your co host here in our episode today, and I'm joined by my colleague and good friend, Matt Long. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Kevin. Thank you. How are you?
Doing wonderful. We've got a very interesting guest who's joining us here today, a gentleman by the name of Niall Browne, the co-founder of AIBound. And he's going to come on here today and speak with us a little bit about what's been going on in his corner of the world and his story and journey with respect to AIBound itself. Niall, how are you doing today, sir?
Hey, I'm doing great, Kevin, and yourself. And first of all, thanks for inviting me onto the show.
We're very, very happy to have you. Very interesting organization you guys have there, and a very interesting product, and very timely, and something that a lot of folks are talking about in the market at this time. With AI adoption moving as fast as it is, and enterprise security teams scrambling to maintain control of the whole world at this time, we're definitely coming into the marketplace at a very interesting time frame. With respect to I mean, Matt and I've had the opportunity to talk with you in the past. For those who don't know you, maybe you can give us kind of like a quick rundown about who you are and your background, and how you got around to founding AI Bound.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I've worked in cybersecurity for about 25 years, been a 5 times chief information security officer. Most recently, I was the global CISO at Palo Alto Networks, where I was responsible for cybersecurity of all of our products or platform and enterprise or customers. And before that, I was at Workday, where I was also basically the global chief security officer and the chief trust officer. So I've spent certainly a lot of my time dealing with what are the top problems that organizations face, what are some of the solutions that will help them along the journey itself, and how do you make that process as seamless as possible.
Yeah, there's a lot of concern in the marketplace right now, and we're definitely in the new frontier. This is definitely the wild, wild west from a certain perspective. And there's a lot of folks that are worried on two fronts, right? There's the folks that are worried that AI is kind of running rampant and there's no rules. And there's others that are concerned that the rules are a little bit too cumbersome and they're preventing the industry from really reaching its potential. How do you kind of reconcile those two diametrically opposing perspectives of either it's too restricted or it's not restricted enough?
Yeah, I think the former, that it's being too restrictive, is that's definitely the sideboard conversation you have with the engineer. And then if you take it up to the boardroom and the compliance office, they're like more restrictions from there. So, no, great question. I think one of the biggest issues certainly as it relates to AI is every organization needs to be an AI first company. Every engineer, every head of marketing, every salesperson, everybody needs to be an AI first
Mm.
lead from there. So with that, what's happening is there's a huge transformation of the journey. Before, what would happen is if you wanted access to the best technology, you'd had to be deeply technical itself to get access. Now with AI, it's democratized that. Everybody in
Mm.
the organization itself, whether they're technical, non-technical, senior, junior, are experimenting with AI. If they're not experimenting with AI, they're doing something wrong. So it's the equivalent of looking at a tennis player and saying, I want you to be the best tennis player of the world, and giving them a book and not allowing them to experiment with or not allow them to play the game of tennis. Very similar with AI. Every user on their laptops and their systems generally have like 30, 35 components of AI that they're running at any one time. They're experimenting with that. They're hooking up to production systems. Um, and they need to, because again, AI first company, AI first staff member from there. And then to your point, on the flip side of the house from there, one of the biggest issues, how do you secure that? How do you put the guardrails in place to ensure you've got the right level of security, while at the same time, you can't slow down the business? It's a runaway train. It's moving at 100 miles an hour from there. So you want to make sure you've got the right guardrails, but they need to be flexible. They need to be light. They need to be interchangeable from there. And that's the only security teams, compliance teams that will survive in this fast moving AI environment.
Yeah, I just want to step back a little bit. I know that you've had the role of a CISO for quite a while now, but it's still relatively new. And a lot of people may not quite understand where it fits in an organization, what things you care about, how it's different like a CIO. things like that. Can you talk just a little bit about what the roles, responsibilities, and concerns are of a CISO and what you're really tapped to do?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if you think about basically a CTO's purpose is how to make sure we're using the best technology for the organization. A CIO's perspective is how to make sure basically if I've got the right technology that the users are using it in the right way and getting the maximum benefit. And then if you think of a chief security officer, you've got the best technology being used by all the users. How do you do that in a means and manner that's highly secure? In some segments, it's quite straightforward. So if you look at like HR data or financial data from there, unregulated systems, those controls, counter controls, technical policy procedures, guideline frameworks have been around for years and years. So that's more compliance checkbox approach.
Mhm.
Now with AI itself, because it's a brand new technology, brand new model, none of the old controls apply in any way whatsoever. So every CISO, every compliance officer, privacy officer, security team, they're all struggling with the same thing from there. What are the right level of controls that I can place to secure the data, but at the same time to allow the business to move at that 100 miles an hour breakneck speed that they need to do. So I've certainly seen, and I've been in the industry for about 25 years. It's certainly been the most exciting time for security engineers and professionals because now they've got to reinvent the wheel for the first time. And that's pretty unique. Usually they follow behind technology controls. Now the CISO is front and foremost based in relation to how do I make sure my company can be tremendously successful, become that AI first company, but at the same time, we don't have a breach or we don't have an issue with customer data kind of going forward.
So I guess I mean, it's really on two fronts. One, if you're providing a SaaS offering of some sort, making sure that your data infrastructure and the customer's data is secure as possible. But then there's a flip side too about all of your personnel and employees that are using AI to do their jobs, right? And I imagine that gets really difficult now that AI is embedded in almost every platform, right? Is everything have the same risk, or how do you kind of figure out what are the most risky items and platforms and things to be concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, I would generally always start with the end users. So, what do the end users want to do from there? Again, becoming that AI first kind of staff member. And with that, basically, they want to download the tool. In other words, get the tennis racket. If you got the tennis racket, then you've got to play on the court from that perspective. So now I've downloaded the tools and technologies from there. I want to play. And then where do you play? I can go back the IT route and I can request an account off them and then I can request them to approve my technology or my tennis racket from there. Sure, I can, but I know that's going to take 6, 9, 10 months. They'll probably say no. In the interim, basically, I'm getting worse and worse, basically, at AI or worse and worse at tennis from there. I need to be the best tennis player in the world, the best technologist, the best AI. So with that, vast majority of individuals are taking shortcuts and it's human nature. So as soon as they deploy the technology, the first thing they do is they need to hook it up into real data. So if they want to hook it into real data, they may look and say, well, hang on a second. Jira and Confluence are pretty interesting. That's where my engineering data is. My financial data might be in SAP. My HR data may be in Workday from that perspective. And now basically my AI, and then it's like, how do I bridge the gap? And then the way to bridge the gap generally is they all generally have their own end user accounts to access those systems. So now they're giving those end user accounts to the AI technology to access the highly sensitive data. And that's where the problem kind of comes in from there. And if you look at that journey itself, it's not malicious. It's a simple user looking at, say, I want to get the highest value for the company. I want to get the highest value for my organization. And I want to do it in a means whereby I can move quickly. Red tape will slow me down. So net, they're making bold decisions to get bold results. And I think, that generally is where some of the highest risk comes into place itself. It's not that developer deep within the production environment where nobody sees in the data center. It's generally the likes of, say, yourself, myself, Kevin, being on our laptop, installing Perplexity computer, Cloud computer, connecting ourselves to the top 20 applications we typically use. Now I've got access to to all of the sensitive data, which is great. The problem is now the AI model has access to the most sensitive data. Do I trust them? Who are they? Do they have the right controls? Are they learning from my data? If they're learning from my data, Will it be shared with my competitors? So they're all the issues that come into mind when you think about it from a security and a compliance perspective. And again, you always have to temper in the means whereby you can provide the right guardrails without slowing down the business, because every
Mm.
CISO, every compliance, every privacy officer I've spoken to, and I've been a CISO for 20 plus years, this is the one whereby if they slow down the business's journey to become that AI first company, then they will get rolled over from there. So hence that never seen this level of debate and interest amongst the CISOs. And that's effectively why we created kind of AIBound in the first place. I spoke to I'd say maybe 400 or 500 CISOs and securities and compliance officers, got their feedback, what's their top problem, and with that kind of built that AIBound platform.
So you're hitting upon an interesting element there. So, and it's something that maybe a lot of our listeners are not familiar with, this whole concept of that governance gap in this wild, wild west that we're facing, right? The phrase shadow AI, and we used to use the phrase shadow IT. Maybe you can share a little bit about what that shadow AI term means, and what questions should a CISO be asking themselves or asking their organization as they try to address the governance gap that's being brought out by it.
Yeah, so I think, if you think about shadow IT has been around for quite a few years itself, and there's always been kind of a model whereby you use IT, but only IT that's approved by IT. So in other words, there are applications that IT approve. Now, the issue is obviously IT are always inundated. So their approval mechanism for that application, because there might be 100 steps in that regulation, may take quite some time. So oftentimes you don't have access to the best tools and technologies because you're waiting for IT to approve it. So what's naturally happened over time is users have said, well, I'm going to deploy the IT on my laptop, on my systems that works best for me. They've been doing certainly that for the last 20 years. That's pretty straightforward from there. That's generally considered shadow AI. So you've got authorized IT, and then you've got shadow kind of IT from there. For the most part, it's not necessarily bad per se. In other words, like they're innovating with the best technology, but there is some risk associated with that. Now, if you think about what shadow IT, it's just an application. It's not autonomous. It doesn't think from there. It's just viewing data. Shadow AI is exponentially more risk from there because you have an agent, they're running on your laptop and you install like an MCP server, an AI agent, or a local LLM model like DeepSeek from there. Now, for the most part, basically, where does that send its data to? Is it autonomous from that end? Can it make decisions after decisions? What's my role from there? Do I have visibility into what it's doing? When it gives me a result back, basically, is it deterministic? In other words, is it the same result every single time? Is it non-deterministic? So shadow AI is where you're using unauthorized AI at a much higher degree of risk from there. Now, I would probably say the vast 99% of the AI in organizations at the moment, it's shadow AI without a doubt. That everyone
Wow.
is using it there. And it's not necessarily bad per se, but it puts that organization at risk. And I think there's three top questions basically there, or three problems we saw from there. One, as per Gartner, 92% of organizations, 92% have no visibility into AI that they're running across their platform from there. So that's only 8%. And even when I say 92, I would realistically say probably 99% from there. So solving for that visibility, what AI am I running from there? That's the first problem that AIBound solves. The second problem we solve is like once you know what the inventory is running, 87% of organizations have looked at it and have said AI. I don't know what the risk of that application or that model of the MCP server. Two, we solve that right out of the gate from there. We'll give you a full risk inventory of every single application, MCP server, AI agent that you're running. And then three, Kevin, to your point, is like on the governance perspective, what do I do from there? So we either detect, prevent, help you put guardrails in place to secure that. Because 70% of organizations don't have a proper AI governance model from there. So if you think of most people put the cart before the horse here, and they think about this and they say, well, I'm going to put a governance program in place. Well, you can't govern what you can't see. The
Mhm.
vast majority of organizations don't know what they're running. They don't know what the risk is. Their opportunity to put a governance model for the most part is it's just shadow. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So For us, what we found is once we were able to deploy, within about 24 hours, we'll tell you every single AI application, MCP server model that's running across your tech stack. Two, what's the risk of every single one of those? And then three, basically, what do I need to do going forward? I would say realistically, in this day and age, maybe not even 1% of organizations are able to do that.
Wow, I just imagine as a CISO, just considering potential exposure, it's just got to keep you up at night because it's like
Yeah.
you just don't know what's going on in the organization. You're tasked to ensure that the security and safety and integrity of your data, both for your customers and yourself. And I think I heard you say that you can get insights into what's going on in a matter of 24 hours, not weeks, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit more about how that works?
Yeah, so we specifically designed basically our platform is how can we be as frictionless, as interoperable as possible. Um, and that was the core requirement. So originally it was that would we deploy hardware, and then obviously the life cycle of reviewing hardware, deploying it is probably 6, 9 months. And this
Hmm.
is a huge problem now. Never mind 9 months from now from there.
Right.
Could we deploy agents? Sure, we can. But then the common complaint basically is, hey, I'm already running 17 agents on my laptop. And now you want me to run the 18th laptop agent. Then you open up an application and the 17 agents are like cats and dogs fighting about basic process and CPU and security. So that's a huge issue from there. Security, IT hate agents from there. So what we did is we built a set of basic kind of lightweight endpoint scripts and connectors whereby they can connect seamlessly into the environment, pull the data back, read only permissions. So where basically we don't have the access to make any changes. And then it's pushed from the customer environment. So from our point of view, we don't have access to the customer environment. They push the data to us and we enrich it and we analyze as part of that platform. So with us, we try to build that platform whereby you have this set of scripts, the set of connectors, and it really enables basically the user to enable the permissions on their side, generally probably within a couple of hours of their environment. We can generally within about 6 hours, 6 or 8 hours, we've given you your full AI inventory from there. We've given you basically all of the risks. And then what we're also do as part of the platform is we don't give you basically just 100 technical issues to solve. We summarize that into called AI insights. So you as a CTO, CIO, CISO itself, what are the top things you need to solve as part of it from there? As we look at this, if we just solve the first part of the issue, the visibility, we're putting customers way, way, way ahead of their peers. As we solve the visibility issue, as we solve the risk issue, and then as we solve basically the governance model itself, we were seeing that we can demonstrate kind of significant value to the customer very, very quickly because they're all terrified of the tap on the shoulder to say, hey, by the way, now, like, do you know what AI is running? Do you know what the risk is? What are we doing? And the vast majority of the time is in every single organization. I would say again, 99% of organizations is we just don't know.
Yeah, I guess awareness is always the first step in any journey, right? Understanding what's going on. Just that alone, I think, has got to help so much. But then the fact that you could also kind of understand the risk factors and that prioritize, suggest solutions for it is really invaluable. If someone didn't have anything like AI bound, how would they approach this today? Is it just an arduous task of trying to chase down everything that's been across the organization, or what other solutions or abilities would people have to try to combat this?
Yeah, I think for the most part, basically, if you think about like security, it's all about engineering is all about automation, automation,
Mm,
automation. If you wanted to do it the other way, it would certainly be very manual and intensive. So what you have to do is you have to go on to every single endpoint, pull back every single application, every single process that's there. Two, you'd have to look at every single application process to identify, is it an AI application or process? Three, then you'd have to categorize, what does it do? Like, is it a cat meme versus like, is it a model that has access into your source code system? And then four, you'd have to do basically, you'd have to risk categorize that. So you'd run it off the laptop, you'd have hundreds of thousands of processes. You could certainly do that, but to do that from on one laptop, well, across your entire ecosystem, you're generally looking about 6 months to get that results. We're delivering that within about, on average, about, I think about 6 minutes. Any application,
wow.
anything that's running, we're able to show you what you're running, what does it do, what the risk level is, what does it have access to within the 6 minutes. You can still try to gather that data with using like 10 or 20 different tools, pull it in together, but you're looking at your average engineer. Once you do that, it will take them a huge amount of time to gather. And as soon as they generate the report, it's out of date. And like two very simple examples of that would be, one is the most recent example with kind of OpenClaw, whereby every customer struggling with this. OpenClaw obviously being kind of the MCP server that has that would have access to a significant amount of systems you connect and acts almost autonomously. So every organization, same thing as well, is that if I'm an engineer, if I'm in marketing, I installed OpenClaw because wow, it sounds really good, and I like Shadow AI, and I deploy. Done from there. Most organizations spend 4, 5, 6 days chasing down. Are we like, first of all, it's like, hey, OpenClaw, are we running that? It might take them 5, 6 days to answer, are they running that? Then next question is, where is it running from there? One of our case studies we've published is basically one of our customers who was running OpenClaw. Well, they're all running OpenClaw, but one in particular basically was running OpenClaw basically on 47 different staff members endpoints from there. So within seconds, we were able to identify that OpenClaw as basic, its score dropped down to an F score. So now we knew it was an F score straight away.
Mm.
Then straight away we were able to answer is, next click, where is it installed? It's installed in these 47 different endpoints. Third click, either uninstall it or else file a ticket back to the GRC kind of platform across the board. So with that, we're able to move very quickly on identifying the issue and what are the next steps. And we're certainly finding is one of the key ROIs, apart from just security, it's efficiency. What I would find in the past is every time there'd be a vulnerability, they'd give it to me and say, hey, Niall, you've got a vulnerability. And then I'm like, well, I don't really know if I do. And then I might have to ping 3 or 4 or 5, 6 or 7 or 8,000 engineers and say, guys, are you actually running that application somewhere within the stack? They will in turn do it because it's critical vulnerability, but it will take their smart people to do that. It'll take them 4 or 5 days to do that. Eventually they'll come back. And at the end of the day, it could be like, no, we're not running that. Well, I just basically burn my relationship with them. And then they had to spend thousands of hours doing the research. With OpenAI, or basically with basically AIBound, it's much more straightforward. I can simply go into the platform itself, look, is OpenClaw installed, find out where it's installed, and then be either basically prevent it in real time or else basically put a governance program in place for how do I manage doing that going forward. So I think that the level of efficiency, that's the number one thing I wanted to solve with AIBound. How do I ensure basically I can make IT's life, engineering's life much more straightforward or efficient? Because in the past, what I would have to do is get them to go to 10 different tools and technologies. And obviously that's a critical issue across the board.
Yeah, it's just really fascinating stuff. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the platform in a bit, but I want to switch gears for a moment and just talk about kind of your approach, because I believe that you guys were in stealth mode for maybe a year and a half as you're developing this thing, which is a common thing that companies do. But what was the genesis of kind of that journey? And then how recently have you come out of stealth mode, and how are you getting yourself kind of launched or into the world at this point? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we're in stealth for approximately about a year, built up the team, built up the platform. I had some core members from my old team kind of join, which was great. So with that, basically, with that, because as a CISO from there, just down through the years, basically, most of my peers were CISOs. So that was a great opportunity to reach out to them. US, Ireland, Japan, finance, healthcare, small, large regulators. So with that, we spoke to maybe about 400 or 500 different people and got as much feedback. And like, what's the number one issue? What problem do you need to solve? That's the top one. So that was, I opened to every conversation. What's the top problem? And that's the ones that came up every single time itself is give me visibility, give me risk, tell me what to do from there. So with that, that was at the very start, we got huge signals across the board from virtually everybody. That was highly beneficial in kind of building up the technology, building up the platform. We got some of the best design partners in the industry to test the platform, provide feedback from there. And with that, we were able to take that. And RSA this year, we launched, went to market itself, started onboarding customers, both from financial services, healthcare, insurance, technology. So it was certainly kind of a very, very exciting journey. And then now we're having the conversation as we've launched in the US. In parallel, we've launched internationally itself. And even just this morning, I spent basically like 2 hours talking to partners in South Africa, in the UK, and across Europe in relation to what are the issues that they're facing. And obviously, they've got a different set of issues. Well, to a certain extent, if you look at in the EU, data privacy is kind of sacrosanct from there. So with that basically, they're very much looking at it from security is interesting, but I'm really, really, really interested about privacy because there's a new, obviously, EU AI Act that's coming about. And with that, you've got fines, I believe, was it 35 million, 7% of global revenue. And that's just like if you're a US company and then you've got customers in from Europe, then obviously you're being pulled into that. So what we're finding is we built the technology platform. We went to market within the US, great conversations there, significant kind of depth from there. And now in parallel, we're focused kind of internationally, EU Privacy Act itself, the AI Act itself, and then how do we meet kind of those requirements as well? So, and then along the way, we've had some fascinating conversations with partners, some of the largest partners in the industry on how that they deploy AIBound. And we're generally finding that it resonates very strongly. I mean, when we say, like, what problem do you solve? Visibility, risk, control. Like that's the thing everybody wants to do. You can't do control and governance without visibility. So as we go through that journey, that's certainly been highly beneficial. We could have taken that the flip side and basically within a week of kicking off the company, launching a platform or product that effectively nobody would want. But instead, we spend a lot of time working with some of the largest kind of CISOs on what's your problem? Like, what's the gap? What do you want us to solve? And for us, I believe that's paid off spades without a doubt.
You know, you're bringing up a very interesting and yet challenging subject, right? Relative to the fact that you're trying to build, everyone in your industry is trying to build something to a standard that is constantly changing. And every time you turn around, there's a new regulation, there's a new update, there's a new threat that's coming out. How do you and so I'm going to go back to tech because that's kind of where I like to play. How does your solution approach that so that it is able to provide insight that's actionable in a world that's constantly changing where the threat perception of anything can go from A to Z overnight?
Yeah, I mean, and that's always the issue itself. Like if something is static, I can stay static for the most part. And then that's easy. You're just waiting for things to move. They move one step, I move one step. AI, to your point, I've never seen the level of change. It's very dynamic. 1 minute basis to one technology, next minute's another. It's huge. If I look at applications, we have X apps, and then suddenly you might see another app, another application, another application. So it's a very dynamic environment. So what we did is we built kind of Guardian AI. So that's our proprietary AI tech stack from there. So with that, what we do is as we gather data, we have about 105 different connectors into hundreds of security tools and technology platforms that we spend a tremendous amount of time building up. So we got that visibility. As we're pulling the data back, everything then is processed through Guardian AI. So that's continuously analyzing basically the AI on those systems. So like what is the AI? What is it used for? What is the risk? So the example would be OpenClaw from there may have a B score at some point, but then suddenly basically it's seen as having a critical issue. It may have a CVE from there. There might be negative industry sentiment about that. And then literally within minutes, we're able to dynamically change the risk of every single application that are out there. So what we do is we use Guardian AI to look at every single application. And then we do that, we use it across about 250 data points. So these 250 data points, why is that application safe or why is that insecure? And then very much like high school or college, we want to make it as simple as possible. We don't want to give you a score of 233 out of 1,300. It's like instead, make it simple. We're building AI-bound by security practitioners for security practitioners. So very simple. The most trusted AI, Guardian AI, gives it a risk of A. B's and C's, like college, you're doing really good. D's, you probably want to keep an eye on it from there. And then F's out the door from that perspective, unless they become D's and B's over time. So that's always the way we kind of we think and look at that. as we're looking dynamically at changing the risk from there, we're always looking at the signals from there, like hundreds of signals from the industry. Like, what's this? It's safe yesterday? It's great yesterday, but now it's got a common vulnerability, CVE, that's 10. Well, it's not safe anymore. It's lower, it's much higher risk. So we'll drop it as higher risk. And then, like OpenLLM will say, by the way, you've got something that's running in your environment that's F. Everybody can understand that. And there's 47 employees that are running it, i.e. local club. What do you want to do? Like, that's
Mm.
how simple you get it. And then, Kevin, to your point is, but it changes. Same thing as well as every time we get a new application and then our first iteration of Guardian AI, we built it for 50,000 applications. So most comprehensive AI security inventory in the industry without a doubt. And then what we're seeing from there is we're seeing hundreds of new AI applications every single day. So with that, as soon as we see an application we haven't seen before, we run it through Guardian AI, and generally within about 4 minutes to 5 minutes, will tell you about that risk of that. So you as an end user in an ever-changing environment are never more than like maybe 5 minutes away from what's that risk of that? What's the risk of every single application that's running across my entire tech stack, and what do I need to focus on that? So Guardian AI was the I think the genesis of like how do we make this an AI first company, whereby as we're analyzing AI data from the company, we're not your legacy provider or vendor itself that's using old technology from there. Everything runs through our proprietary kind of AI models. And then you from as chief security officer, security analyst from there, privacy officer, say, but like how many Ds are you running? How many Fs are you running in the ecosystem? Again, we try to make it as simple and easy as possible. And then the big thing I think making it is defensible. Like you can give something an F score. So you could look at my car and say, "No, I give your car an F score." I'm like, "But that's not F, basically. It's actually a B from there." And then the conversation between security and IT goes back and forth. The way we bake this in, once we give something a rating, and again, we'll do that across hundreds of points from there. We generate like a 5-pillar report, and that shows across all categories why did we give it an F? So it's very easy to be articulated from there. So then it's like, yeah, maybe my car is an F from that end because it's this old, it's got these tires, it's bold from that end. Or maybe it's not, maybe it's a D, but at least now we've got all of that data. So we've certainly built over a very rich taxonomy of data using Guardian AI of every single AI application out there. And then it's very easy consumable, either by a security analyst, by an operator, the board, or the engineering. It's a simple report basically you can pull for any application or for any ecosystem. Again, we want to make security the same way as as it democratized people itself within environments. We want to use AI to democratize security within organizations.
And your AI, I assume if you've got that many data points, it's not just a technical assessment you're doing. I mean, I imagine that evaluation takes the germane business drivers inside the organization into account?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we're able to see basically what the AI is, what's its intent is basically from that end, what its risk level, and what's it actually doing from there. So that's hugely valuable from as well, because if you can imagine it, like I'm traveling basically, and I don't know where to go, and I install Maps, and then I install Google Maps, and then I install Waze from there. I'm just experimenting. Which one is better? I don't know, but I'll use it different. Same thing as well. What we're finding is your average user is using at least 35 different AI apps. Some are
Wow.
high risk in there, some are low risk in there, some are highly connected. Well, if you've got an AI model basically that is, when you think about an AI, if you've got an AI model and that's hooked, that's basically an orphan AI. So notice you've installed it, but you haven't done anything with it. It's not hooked into Jira, it's not hooked into Slack, it's not hooked into your GitLab environment, it's not hooked into Workday. You kind of care about that, but not as much. What happens if the same AI is connected into Workday and has access to your HR information? Now you really care. Or it has access to your source code. Now you really care itself. So one of the key kind of deterministic points of Guardian itself is we're able to look into the sentiment of the AI. What is it connected into? What permissions does it have from there? And that for us is hugely powerful because now we've answered all the questions you people would have had for it. Like, Tell me what's running. Tell me what's running. What does it do? What the risk level is from there? What does it have access from there? What should I do? So your top like 5 or 6 questions that everybody has, think about the 5 whys in business. You always ask the 5 whys. Same thing as well. We build kind of the AI-bound platform around guarding AI to be able to answer those 5 whys for organizations. And then again, we've done it in a very, trying to make it as democratized as possible, whereby it's, as an end user, I can consume the data, I can view the data. I don't need to worry about like where the scores. It's an F score. Here's the reason it's an F score, and it has access to Workday and HR data. Very few people disagree with that going forward, as opposed to there's something out there, but it's bad. We try to make it as justifiable. And the reason for that is security by itself can never act. Security can jump into the system and pull the laptop. They can't uninstall an application. They can't shut down. They're always counting on their fellow peers from there. They're also counting on engineering. They're counting on IT to partner with them. If security is going to IT and say, that AI bad. Why is bad? Bad AI. No, but everyone's running it's bad. That's the chaos model from there. Instead, it's like, here's an application, OpenClaw, it's got an F rating from there. Here's in rigor, here's why it's considered bad from that end. It's very, very easy for organizations to do that. And that's the black and white model. What about the gray model then, whereby you've got a lot of applications out there that might be C's and D's from there? And again, that's the conversation. Nothing is written in stone. Now you can have that knowledgeable conversation with IT. You don't feel like, and before what would happen is you'd almost feel like a fool. You'd go to IT or you'd go to engineering with maybe a Rapid7, like a security vulnerability scan, Rapid7 and Qualys, and you're like, bad. And they're like, that IP just doesn't exist. And like, no, it's bad. Yeah, but it doesn't exist. Or they'd look at it and say, it exists, but we're not running that in the technology stack. And then it becomes that friction. But I'll file a JIRA ticket against you. And then they're like, well, I close the ticket, and then nothing ever gets done. Whether in this one, we built that platform whereby it drives debate, just drives discussions from there for us, and that's key. And I think one of the areas that we've spent a lot of time in is how do we aim for different audiences from there? So if I'm a security analyst, I can leverage the platform to get full visibility to all of the AI, the risk itself, what does it have access to? What do I need to do? But what about basically the board? What happens if my C-level taps me in the shoulder and says, I want to report on, tell me what the AI is running, and I want it next week from there. Generate, and that's generally been always the conversation is I as a CISO and other CISOs and other CTO levels generally report into the board at least once every quarter. Every single quarter, every single board has the same conversation. How are we securing AI? And up to this point, it's like we've gotten a policy, 1-pager. We've got a training program, 2 slides. And then 3, basically, we've got a governance program, maybe 2 or 3 people in the corner that generally talk business from there. What we've done is like, as we've looked at the risk of individual AI, we're able to bake all of that up. So imagine if you've got 10,000 people in an organization and you're running hundreds of thousands of components of AI, accessing dozens of applications of systems with varying levels of risk. We're able to take all of the data and summarize that using kind of AI insights or using Guardian. And with that, we can give basically anyone in the C team or anyone in the board basically 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on how long page document that you need, on like what are the top questions that you have. So before it would have taken a team of like 8 people a week or 2 to gather that data. Now I can gather that pretty much immediately because I can just basically, I've got the data, I've got the hundreds of thousands of components. Now I'm just summarizing it in a way whereby the board can understand that. So we're finding it's security analysts understanding what AI is being running and what's the risk. It's the compliance team understanding basically how do I tie into my compliance and privacy. But it's also very important what we're finding is that many of our AI insights basically reports are feeding directly into the board reports, whereby they'll take it, it'll become part of the board deck. They'll modify obviously depending on their style and everything else. But generally it just means, again, efficiency. I'm not chasing down IT to fix bugs that don't exist. I'm not chasing down my internal team to pull all of these data points basically that takes them at thousands. Because I remember every single quarter for at least basically, I would say 2 weeks before the board, I would take maybe 5% of my team offline to generate these metrics. Now I know when I go into my board meeting, the first thing I'll be asked, because I've been asked this dozens of times, is how are we securing AI? Now I'm able to show, here's your footprint, here's all the AI that's running. Here's the towards their top risk. Here's what we've got access to. Here's our governance control program. And by the way, the first one is strong visibility. Second one is basically strong. We know what it is. Third one, our governance is weak. But even if you can get to the point whereby an organization can say, I've got a weak governance product, because it'll take them a while to take the data and make their governance program as strong as cloud. Even if they can get to that level, they're in a great position. If they can just answer the first question, what am I running itself? Then they're in a really, really, really good position kind of going forward. And again, what we're generally finding with most customers is a pretty easy kind of onboarding process.
Well, it's a fascinating solution. It's certainly relevant and critical for any
Right.
organization to get on top of. I just have one more question before we wrap up. I just want to circle back to the EU AI Act. Because one thing you said, U.S. companies, because a lot of times you think, oh, it doesn't apply to us, but if you're doing any business there, it applies. Can you just quickly explain what it is, and then just what the concerns are for organizations in terms of kind of being compliant with this new regulation that's going out there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And generally, the way you're generally ahead of most regions as it relates to like data privacy, hands down, obviously, because of the history of Europe and everything else. And then the big thing from there, it's like with AI, tremendous benefits, some risks from there. So what's the most riskiest things you can think about? Well, it's like to say, you go for healthcare and they're like, hey, Matt, AI has looked at you and said, you're not worth saving, buddy. So you're not getting the care you want from there. Or else, Kevin, your kids are going to college and they look at it and they say, well, your grades back in, third grade, you got a D, you're out from there. Or you go to get a mortgage on an account on a house from there, and it says, well, because you lived in an area that was a bad area that has a high crime rate from the past, maybe you're a criminal as well. So, and AI has a tendency of doing that, like they bucket everybody into categories. Or you apply for a job and they look at you and say, yeah, you're just too old. And that's what AI can do, will do, and an awful lot every time without a set of guardrails from there. So the EU kind of realized that they started creating the EU AI Act. So how do I ensure basically that AI operates in a fair and kind of equitable manner from there? That's kind of their core focus. And it breaks it into like, three major things. One is, do I know basically all of the AI that I'm learning? Again, AI bound story. Two, do I know what the risk of that is? And then three, like, do I have a governance program in place to approve it, decline it, accept it from there? So with that, again, as we're having those hundreds of conversations, many of them with Europe, we're able to align directly with that EU kind of AI Act. And then, Matt, to your point is, it's not optional from there. There's tremendous fines kind of associated with that, without a doubt. And then there's no company, very few companies that are localized these days. The vast majority, whether they know it or not, even if they're a local hardware store, they probably have customers buying from Europe. Internationals certainly have, without a doubt. So what they're doing is they're being pulled directly in. And then as EU comes up with the standard, very quickly that becomes the standard across that industry. So what we're finding is like the forcing function for AIBound. It's just not like, how do I make sure that I've got a great security program in place for managing AI, but it's also how do I get off the fence? And the reason getting off the fence now is that with that new EU AI Act coming into force kind of later on this summer, then the core component from there, I need to make the requirements. It's no longer optional. Now it's mandatory. And if you're looking at global fines of 7% of your global revenue, that's tremendous impact on the business without a doubt. And that's how seriously people are taking AI, and certainly relating to PII, healthcare data, financial data.
Wow. It seems that every time we think we've kind of got the genie in the bottle just changes and the genie gets bigger every time you turn around. I would love to have this conversation going on for another hour because I'm learning so much on this one myself. But unfortunately, we are going to have to bring our episode to a close. I do want to thank you very much for kind of bringing some of these subjects to the floor. For I'm sure for many of our listeners, they're learning these for the first time, as Matt and I are as well. Some of the statistics you brought up are very sobering. Some are a little terrifying. And so for sharing that, very, very thankful. With respect to that, though, with everything you've shared that a CISO I'm hoping is listening to as they're paying attention through this episode, what would you like them to walk away from listening to this episode today? If there's one lesson they can learn, whether that's related to your product or related to the industry in general, what would you hope that they walk away with a better appreciation of after having listened to today's episode?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's manageable. I mean, that's the big thing. Like, the worst thing is like, what do I do? Like, if I don't know, perfection is the enemy of good from there. So in other words, basically, I can look at right to left, not sure which one. So I'll freeze frame, sit on the fence from there. And that's obviously what most has been happening for quite some time. Now we're starting to look at basically how do we help solve that problem from there. And again, you can't solve it unless you get visibility. So starting off with like baby steps, crawl, walk, run. I
Mm.
just want to get visibility. Once you get visibility, crawl, then you want to walk, like, what the risk is. And then you create that governance program. Then you're running from that perspective. So I think the most difficult step in a journey, the most difficult page to write in a book, it's always the first step and then the first page as well. And it's very similar with a CISO from there. Where do I start as part of that journey? I would always recommend people start with visibility. Everything else, technology, cloud, it's always that I can't manage what I can't see from that end. If you can give them visibility, you can tell them the risk, and then you can give recommendations. Now they can very quickly build up a governance program from there. And I think that's critically important. And then two, I think it's really kind of don't feel bad about yourself. So, I have talked to CISOs whereby it's like, well, I haven't done this, I haven't done this, I haven't done this, I haven't done this, I haven't done this. And then I'm like, hang on a second, none of your peers have done it either per se. So like it's the feel good factor. Like, if like you haven't done there's a lot to do, but your neighbor next to you has even more to do, that kind of empowers you to get going, do the spring cleaning from there. So I think CISOs are in a great position. I think basically they, by taking the first step one, step two, step three, visibility, risk, control, they're in a great part of the journey. Now is the right time to shape that journey. And then three, I think there's, I would call it basically AI leniency. Like, in other words, if you're a CISO and you make a mistake in a tried and technology process, it's generally a case of, hey, that process has been around for ages. You knew about it. You should have fixed it. You should have done this. With AI, because it's a pure greenfield site, it's a great opportunity for AI, for CISOs to take risks, make mistakes, experiment from there. Generally, what I've seen is nobody will, like, anybody who works in technology, nobody's blaming anybody else for, hey, you tried this versus that. So it's a great kind of opportunity to take those risks, make those changes, drive experimentation. And I think they're the CISOs that will be hugely successful in this new AI era. So as I spoke at the start, every company needs to be AI first. Every engineer and staff member needs to be AI, and every CISO needs to be an AI first CISO from there. And that starts with that first step of the journey.
Wow. Boy, that's a lot to digest and process, but very solid advice. Kind of reminds me of that old adage, the two best times for you to start on an important project was last year and right now. Those are the
Yeah.
two most important times to start on a project, right? Uh, but yeah, there's just so much moving, and in a world that seems to be rewriting its rules literally as it goes. I think that a lot of organizations would be very wise to take a look at what it is you have to offer, because it's not just insights; it's insights that are based on the changing world that they're constantly in, and it can adapt and provide those insights and guidance in real time. Which insights are great, but if they're 6 months old, it doesn't really help you. Matt, what do you think here? Your thoughts on all these topics? A lot to process here.
Yeah, certainly very enlightening and relevant and timely discussion. I think everyone has to be having these discussions around AI because it is changing. It is pushing the boundaries of what's ethical, what's moral, what's safe, what the future looks like. So thank you so much, Niall. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise. No, thank you very much, guys, Matt and Kevin, for having me.
No, thank you very much for coming in. If someone were to reach out to you, what would be the best place for them to connect with you out there if they wanted to follow up on some of the things you've brought up today?
Yeah, I would say if you want to learn more, please just go to like www.aibound.com, or if you want to just send me a direct email itself, it's just BROWNE at AIBound.com. I'd love to hear from people.
Fantastic. We'll make sure that we include that information in the description of today's episode. So, folks, please take advantage of that invitation and reach out and find out where you fit into this wonderful world of AI security. Before we say goodbye, please take a moment, if you haven't already, to like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform it is that you're listening to us today. It costs you nothing and really helps out the channel. And give us some feedback on some of the topics that you might want to hear going forward. But until then, I want to thank my co-host, Matt Long. I want to thank our special guest. I want to thank you for spending a little bit of time learning a little bit more about what's going on in the market today. Until we see you next time, take care, be well.